Welcome to BoomerTech Adventures mini course devoted to taking fabulous pictures of flowers, plants, and the animals all around us. This is one of the 4 videos. And today we're going to focus on what the professional photographers say are really good tips for getting spectacular images. Let's get started. This is Jill. Okay. So 10 plus 1 tips for taking stunning photos of plants and animals. Here's the first one. You need to picture your screen as having a grid, and you want the focal point of your picture not to be smack dab in the center, but up where one of those lines, or 2 of those lines rather, intersect. Often folks will say, for those of us in the West, we should pick the lines that are in the upper left-hand quadrant because that's how we read and that's how our eyes shift left to right. But you can decide what makes sense for you. Now, some of you might be saying, what does she mean by a grid? Well, you can turn the grid on in your settings, and I'm going to show you that just in a second. All right. So if you go to settings, and if you have your iPhone or your iPad, I hope you have it open to the camera app, and now you're just going to switch to settings, and you're going to scroll down to where you see camera, and you're going to tap on camera, and you're going to see this screen on the left, and you'll see that the second item down is grid. And I have it turned on, which means it's green. Then if you look over to the right and you kind of squint your eyes, you can see the white lines of the grid. They're there to help you compose the best possible image that you can. Now, they do not show up when you save the photos or when you email them or print them off. But they're there as a guide to help. So, for example, here's a picture of some pretty sunflower-like flowers, and you will notice that instead of putting those orange, beautiful flowers right smack dab in the middle, I have placed them where the grid lines come together. Let me show you another example. Here's one that Chris Toy took. Look at that beautiful monarch butterfly. But notice again, the flower and the butterfly are not smack dab in the middle. They're edging up towards where the grid line comes. And so you really have I think, a very dramatic picture with the sweep of the monarch's wings, and it focused on gathering pollen from that lovely red flower. Here are 2 more Chris Toy pictures, and again, notice the bright orange mushrooms that really contrast with the green, and the spider in the web over on the right. Now, what he would have done is when he was focusing, he would have tapped his screen so those mushrooms and that spider would be right in that yellow focus box, and they would be what is sharpest. But notice he has them in the intersection of, in this case, imaginary grid lines. Now, a second tip, fill the frame. This gives a much different approach or a much different sense of the flower. You get right down in its face, so to speak. So on the left, we have the common dandelion, and when we fill the frame, we see what an intricate flower it is. On the right, we have a dahlia, and so not only do we see the variations in the colors of the petals, but we see the center and how complex an organism that is. It just gives you a different perspective. Here's another fill the frame approach. This was taken by Beth Como, who is a professional photographer. Again, the common dandelion, but it's when it's in its wispy form, ready to send seeds out over the total landscape. And she's looking down, but she has filled the frame with those wispy white, they're not really petals, wispy white things that are really quite, they're seed pods, that are really quite lovely when you look at them in detail. And it gives you a whole different appreciation for the plants in our area. Now, this is a fun one. Bring a spray bottle and spray plants so it looks like you've been up at, I don't know, 4:45 in the morning. I think that's what I saw on the weather, that dawn is before 5 a.m. now. And spray the flower and the leaves so it looks like you're capturing the morning's dew. And again, it gives just an added detail to make your picture more interesting. And again, I just used a plastic spray bottle, carried it with me, squirt, squirt, and got this effect. Here's another. Again, these are on different kinds of plants. But again, an interesting detail. The one on the right, look at those water droplets. They're reflecting part of the plant. So again, a different perspective, a different detail, something to make your image unique. Now, you can also create your own background and make it look like you're taking a professional picture because you've got a professional photographer's background. Well, all this is colorful cardboard. In this case, it's blue. And I held it up behind parts of the plant. Now, it sounds easy. However, if you look at the left image, you will see that I had to set the cardboard up on the ground. I was dodging bees and trying not to trample the bleeding heart in order to get the background that I wanted. And again, once you get it, you have to be careful that you cut out the other stuff that you don't need. But it is kind of fun, and it's easier to do it in your home. Cardboard probably works better than paper simply because it's stiffer and you can set it against something. But it's kind of fun to explore using a different background. And of course, if you like to make cards or posters or pamphlets with your images, then the background is a nice little detail for you to have. This goes without saying. Choose your subject carefully. Here you see my poor scarlet trillium on the top has been eaten and is looking really worse for the wear. So of course you're going to avoid damaged flowers. You want to look for flowers that either peak or they're budding. But the bottom one, paying attention to the light in the background, is also important because again, you look at a scarlet trillium there, which is in better shape than the one on the top, but you know, the background and the light is not the best. So that's not what I would call a good image. So you need to think about not only does your flower or your plant look, what does it look like, but how can you make sure that the light is adding to the glory of your plant rather than a detraction? Now, I think this is really fun, is to think about reflections. If you look at the picture on the right, you will notice that I've got it reflected in a mirror. It's a little fuzzy, but that's okay, but it adds depth to the picture. So here's some tips, and I'll show you images that typify them. Tips to think about when you're using reflections. If you're using a puddle or a fountain or a lake, think about getting down and holding the phone almost, or the iPad almost in the water. In this case, you might want to use those volume buttons, which are mentioned in another video, to trip your shutter. Instead of trying to get your finger around to the screen to tap the shutter, remember you can use the volume up and down volumes to take a picture. Use the reflections to look for interesting perspectives, and sometimes is there a way to combine the reality of the scene you're in with the reflection? So let's look at some specific examples. Now, I show you this picture. This is not a wonderful, gorgeous scene, other than the leaves were terrific. But it shows the difference you can achieve by using just a simple puddle. So this is an area near where I live. I'm standing up, I took a picture, and you can see, again, not particularly gorgeous landscape. However, there was a puddle right in front of me. So I scooched down and I held my phone down at puddle level. I used the volume buttons to take the picture. Now, once again, not a stunning landscape, but look at the difference between the two. It is a much more interesting picture with that reflection. So imagine that I was in some formal garden and there was a fountain or a puddle that I could use as a reflective basis so that I would get double the color, double the interest by scooching down and using the water as a reflective basis. So something, again, to play around with. That, to me, that's what photography is all about, and the wonder of digital photography is we can play, and what pictures we don't like, we can delete. Now here's another approach. This is by leaning or holding your iPhone or iPad right up against a window in a right angle to it. And you see the deck, the reality of the deck is on the right, but the reflection, which is doubling the scene, including the little plant pot there, is on the left. So that's kind of an interesting thing. As you're walking through different places, look at the windows where you might be able to do this. Here it is simply a plant being reflected in the plexiglass of a deck railing. Again, a simple technique, fun to play around with. Now, here's the deal. We really should wait for the golden hours. And that's considered the first hour after sunrise, which in early June or June is 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., or the last hour before sunset. So you get to decide whether you're an early bird or one who isn't an early bird. I tend to be looking for the last hour before sunset. But what it does is it softens the light and it makes things much prettier, much less harsh than if you're taking it in the midday sun. So here's a picture taken right before sunset. This is a wild, or sometimes called painted dog, in Zimbabwe, Africa. And you can see that if I'd taken that at high noon, the sand and the grass would have been washed out, and the colors of that lovely animal would not be as sharp. So think about the golden hours. If you like to get up early, make sure you take your iPhone with you on your walk. If you are one who thinks getting up with the sun is a little crazy, then think about the evening right before the sun goes down and what great pictures can you get then. Another strategy, of course, is to get in as close as you can. Look at these hosta leaves. You can see the ridges and the differentiation of the colors. Getting in close is a really fun strategy for taking, again, a different approach to photographing plants and animals. Here's a Chris Toy photo. He must have been tiptoeing around in the dark, and he got this picture of this little tree frog, very nicely posing for him on the petal. But he had to get in very close, and so I'm sure he was on his tippy toes, being as quiet as possible. And when you do get in close, The wildlife photographers often say focus on the eye. Think about that yellow box on your camera app and tap it right over the eye of the animal, and you should have an interesting picture. And again, the eye should be in the intersection of one of those grids. Now here's another interesting way to think about plants, and that's to focus on the stamen. Once again, think about that yellow square box and where you're going to place it. In all of these pictures, it was right over the stamen of the particular flower I was taking a picture of. And if you notice the one on the right, not all the flowers are in focus, but I noticed there was a fly there, which actually has a very pretty color, and I put the focus box on that larger pink flower, and it was focused right on the stamen. And again, it's a different aspect of the plant. It gives you more detail than you normally see in just a regular old picture of your plants. Here's another one. I love this one. We don't see the whole flower, but look at the detail of those delicate centers and the different colors and how the red fades into the yellow on the center of the flower. And once again, because it was focused there in the center, the greenery in the back is blurred and does not detract from the focal point of your picture. Now, when we are near water, it is so tempting to make sure that we have water in the picture. But you know, sometimes the water or the sky is not a dramatic asset. You know, it's not always that Caribbean or Mediterranean blue. Some days it's just kind of gray and not particularly interesting. So the picture on the left is, it's a beautiful garden right over the water, but that water does not add any interest to that garden. However, focus just on the flowers, then I think it makes a much neater, nicer, more dramatic picture. So think about the sky and water. Is it really adding to your picture? If not, cut it out. Now this is fun. Unusual perspectives. Again, a Chris Toy photo. Now how do you think he got that? And do you recognize the flower? Well, knowing Chris, he was probably down slithering on his stomach, but you can use a selfie stick with the camera app facing upward with the front-facing lens, the selfie lens going, and you can take a picture from a totally different perspective. Here's another one. Now this is just a common fern, but he took it from the base and it looks like it's a tree, but it's not. Again, a way to have fun with your camera app, especially the iPhone, simply because it's easier to manipulate. And again, taking pictures from the base of the plant, you see things that you don't notice when you are up at standing level and just shooting from chest or waist level. This, I think, is one of my favorites. It's called Echo. And it's when you have two of the same flowers in line with one another. And what you do is you focus on that front picture, again, that yellow box, you tap it, and then the one behind it slightly blurry. And look at that beautiful purplish color, the green background, but it's blurry, so it doesn't detract, again, from the gorgeousness of these two flowers. Now, with animals, our best advice, and the best advice from professional photographers, is to use your burst feature. That's when, well, all of us has done it by mistake. We hold our finger a little too long on the shutter and we hear click, 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 click. That's the burst feature. Well, you can use it purposefully. Now this is Chris LeBay's photo, and I have to admit she was not using an iPhone. She was using a full-size camera with a big lens. But she was using burst because there's no way that she just happened to catch that bird at that moment with the water off its wings, etc. Here's another one. In this case, the bird's got a fish in his mouth. Again, no way that she just happenstance took that picture at the exact moment that the bird was about to swallow the fish. So if you're taking pictures of wildlife or even family pets and you want to get them in a gorgeous position, use the burst and then go into your Photos app and look at all your options, and probably you will find one that is more spectacular than the others. So you delete the ones that are just kind of so-so, and you keep the great pictures like Chris's here with the fish being devoured. So my big idea for today is, when possible, take time to think about your image's composition. What strategy are you going to use, or maybe strategies are you going to use to make your photos stand out from others? A reminder that there are 3 other additional videos, and if you watch them and practice some of the ideas that we share in these videos, then your picture taking of the flora and fauna around you, I guarantee, will improve. This has been Jill from BoomerTech Adventures. If you've never visited us at BoomerTechAdventures.com, I hope you do. And maybe you'll even choose to like us on our Facebook page. And if you enjoy learning through videos, then please check out our YouTube channel, BoomerTech Adventures. Thanks for watching.